Welcome to part 2 on the origins of the Cold War. Now we're going to talk about the Truman Doctrine. From the very beginning, Harry S. Truman will take a strong stance against the Soviets. And in fact, he'll be the first of what we'll term the Cold Warrior presidents. Matter of fact, every president from Harry S. Truman to the fall of the Soviet Union under George Herbert Walker Bush will be considered Cold Warrior presidents. All of them having a primary goal, winning the Cold War. Some of them will be better at it than others, but they'll all at least have that as a primary goal. Okay. Truman will set the stage for this. In 1946, he's going to make a statement. He says, "I am tired of babysitting the Soviets who understand only an iron fist and strong language." Stalin, upon hearing this speech, responded to his statement with a speech where he stressed the basic incompatibility between Soviet communism and Western democracy. The lines are being drawn, right? Truman is going to look for advice, and he's going to tap the most experienced person on the Soviet Union that he can think of at the time, a guy by the name of George F. Kennan. George F. Kennan is a career Foreign Service officer who in 1946 was the charge d'affaires in Moscow. At Truman's request, Kennan is going to send an assessment of Stalin and the intentions of the Soviet Union in a telegram known as the long telegram. Now, for those of you not familiar, you pay for a telegram by the word. Imagine paying for your text messages by the word. That's what a telegram is, right? This telegram was 8,000 words long, sent from Moscow to Washington. Okay, but in it, George Kennan describes the intentions that he feels that the Soviets and Stalin has. He explained that the Soviet hostility towards the West is rooted in the need to legitimize their bloody dictatorship, and therefore they believe that inevitably communism is going to triumph over capitalism. He stated that the Russian policy was to undermine the general and strategic potential of the major Western powers by a host of subversive measures to destroy the individual governments that might stand in the Soviet path, and to do everything possible to set the Western powers against each other. In other words, divide and conquer. From this, Harry S. Truman is going to develop a hardline policy of not trying to go in there and crush the Soviet Union, not invade Russia, but keep communism from spreading beyond where it already had gotten to, a policy of containment. This Truman policy of containment is first going to be tested in Greece. Greece kind of held a unique position at the end of World War II. It was a nation that was occupied by the Nazis that when the war ended had not been liberated by anybody. So the Nazis just kind of fell out. It created a power vacuum. And as a result, you're going to have two different groups try and fill that vacuum. One is going to be a British-backed Republican group, trying to form a Republican government in Greece. But another is going to be a group of communist guerrillas that are going to be supported by Stalin and the Soviets, right? In 1946, civil war is going to break out amongst the economic crisis in Greece. In January of 1947, Britain's going to contact Truman in the United States and basically say, hey, look, guys, we're broke. We spent the empire to defeat Hitler. We cannot afford to support anti-communist movements. You're the superpower now. That's your job. If you want Greece to not fall to the communists, you have to take action. And so as a result, Harry Truman decides that he will do take some action in order to maintain this policy of containment. So on March 12, 1947, Harry Truman is going to make an announcement that he's going to provide aid to Greece and Turkey in order to fight a war against communism. He's going to announce that he's already gotten Congress to back a bill that is going to allow $400 million to be appropriated to this cause, right? And in this speech, he's literally going to issue the official declaration of the Cold War, right? He's going to say in this speech, at the present moment in world history, nearly every nation must choose between alternate ways of life. The choice is too often not a free one. The one way of life is based on the will of the majority. It is distinguished by free institutions, representative government, free elections, guarantees of individual liberty, freedom of speech and religion, and freedom from political oppression. The second way of life is based upon the will of the minority, forcibly imposed upon the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, a controlled press and radio, fixed elections, and the suppression of personal freedoms. I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. I believe that we must assist free peoples and work out their own destinies in their own way, and I believe that our help should primarily be through economic and financial aid, which is essential to the economic stability and orderly political processes. You see, he's now officially thrown the gauntlet down in front of the Soviets, saying this Cold War is on and we are going to defeat communism. So in Europe, the result of this is going to become what's known as the Marshall Plan. Right? In May of 1947, the Secretary of State, George C. Marshall, is going to say that it's going to be imperative to reconstruct the two great workshops. What he's talking about is Germany and Japan. So on June 5th, 1947, he's going to give a speech at Harvard University. He's going to further solidify his intentions toward the Soviets. In this speech, though, Marshall is going to offer economic aid to all European nations so as to permit the emergence of political and social conditions in which institutions can exist. This is the basis of the Marshall Plan, right? Economic aid to Europe to help them rebuild in the aftermath of World War II. And it's offered to all European nations. Even the Soviet Union, if they wish to partake in this plan, could ask for aid. Right? Now, of course, the Soviet Union and its satellite countries that are under its influence on that side of the Iron Curtain are, of course, going to refuse all this aid. But Western Europe is going to pull a lot of it in. Right? The response by the Soviets to the Marshall Plan was in a Paris meeting. They are going to get up in the middle of the meeting and literally walk out. But in Western Europe between 1947 and 1950, $12 billion of support is going to come to help rebuild the economies. And as a result, you're going to have, both in Europe and Japan, very vibrant economies that are built on initially Marshall Plan money. Also in 1947, President Truman is going to begin reorganizing his national defense system. On September 18, 1947, he's going to get Congress to pass the National Security Act. And the National Security Act is going to do a lot of different things. It's going to get rid of the War Department. The War Department goes away and it's replaced with the Department of Defense. What's the difference between the War Department and the Department of Defense? The letterhead. I mean, but of course also the perception. War departments make war. Department of Defense, we just defend ourselves, right? But it's all part of this reorganization in order to create a defensive structure to fight this Cold War, right? It's also going to create a National Security Council, which is a special advisory board to the executive office. And information and intelligence that has been gathered is going to filter through the National Security Council and provide the President of the United States every day, still does this to this day, a national security briefing to let him know what's going on. During World War II, there was a secret service that was called the Operation and Strategic Services that was established by Franklin Roosevelt. However, Truman, after the war was over, dissolved it, mostly because he really didn't like the leader of the OSS, a guy by the name of William Wild Bill Donovan. But he came to realize in this Cold War he needed an organization that was earmarked specifically for the gathering of foreign intelligence. So part of the National Security Act will create the Central Intelligence Agency, the Americans' Foreign Intelligence Office, right? And we'll find as we move forward here of the intelligence agencies here in the Cold War, the CIA, as it becomes called, is going to be probably the least prepared of all of them, but when you think about it, you can see why. They'll be the newest as well. All right, fortunately, they will have a lot of resources to bear, but they don't hold a candle to the skill set of the KGB, for example, because the KGB have a history that dates all the way back to the secret police of the Tsar, right? That's the foundation of some of its initial members. And MI6 had existed since a need was developed in the late 1800s to spy on German naval building. The last piece of this structure was to create some kind of organization to protect frontline Europe, right? Initially, this initiative will be started by European nations, specifically England, France, and Benelux, which is Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, are going to form together in March of 1948 into an alliance, a military alliance called the Western Union. The Western Union was a common defensive alliance between these nations against any Soviet or communist aggression. Truman decided to expand on that. In January of 1949, Truman called for an even broader pact that would include the United States, all Western Europe, 10 countries in all, and Canada. The result was on April 4th, 1949, you'll have the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Its initial members are going to be Belgium, Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and the United States. You notice West Germany's not there? That's because at this time in 1949, West Germany is still basically under a military occupation, right? The change will happen in 1955. On May 5th, 1955, West Germany will be granted full autonomy, and on that same day, West Germany will join NATO. It'll actually cause the Soviets to react. On May 14th, 1955, they'll create a counter-organization to NATO called the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was a military alliance between the USSR and Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. So now we have battle lines and military organizations in place in frontline Europe.